Have you heard? Metro by T-Mobile now includes Amazon Prime. Yes, enjoy the best of shopping and entertainment, movies, TV shows, music, free shipping, and much more. All included for just $40 per line for 3 lines. All on the T-Mobile network. Discover the smarter way. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. One offer per account. Offer subject to change. $12.99 per month value. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video at 480p. Capable device required. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Welcome to Aquarian Radio on aquarianradio.com. And I'm your host, Janet Kira Lessin, with my co-host today, Reverend John Polk. And today we are interviewing a very special guest, Louisa Oakley Green. And Reverend Polk, John, are you there?
I am here. I'm with us.
Hello. Oh, good. There you are. Would you please do the honors and read or talk about Louisa Oakley Green? She is.
All right, I shall. So Louisa Oakley Green, she's going to take our listeners on a tour through the mystical territories of the human experience, from premonitions and near-death adventures to contact with the dead, and a discussion of sightseeing in the undiscovered country, the award-winning book by Louisa Oakley Green. Now, she is an award-winning science writer and journalist and became interested in paranormal phenomenon when she married her psychic husband more than 20 years ago. The former skeptic has worked as a newspaper reporter, public relations manager, and creative director. A University of South Carolina journalism graduate, Green has also studied science for medical writing in New Jersey and traditional astrology in London. She previously published another book, Loitering at the Gate to Eternity, Memoirs of a Psychic Bystander. Her work and interests maintain a curiosity-inspired balance between science and mysticism. And for more information, of course, go to her website, psychicbystander.com. And that's a brief bio on our guest tonight, Louisa Oakley Green.
And Louisa, my sister's name is Louise. Welcome to our show.
Well, thank you for having me. It's nice to be here.
Oh, we're excited to have you. That's one of my favorite topics is ghosts, and you also do NDEs, near-death experiences. When John was reading your information, I was struck by, you said you were a skeptic. Now, I deal with a lot of skeptical people in my life because I'm dealing with this whole genre of interviewing people, and it's interesting I'd like to ask you, how did you go from being a skeptic? Were you, like my second husband was a really hardcore skeptic. It didn't matter what I told him, he just never believed. He just was, adamant. Were you one of those hardcore skeptics, or were you kind of
I sure was.
A little bit open?
Yeah, I think it comes down to what you and I talked about before we got on the air. I think that people are more open to psychic experiences if they've either had one or they know someone they trust who's had one. If they've never had a psychic experience and they don't really know anyone that they feel confident in who's had one, they're more likely to be skeptics. And I kind of fell into that category. I grew up in an environment where it was thought of as superstition. And I didn't take it very seriously. In fact, I was pretty obnoxious about it. Now, I like to think that the universe has a sense of humor, and so here I am, a hardline skeptic, and who does the universe present to me more than 20 years ago? But my future husband, Stephen, who happens to be a very talented psychic. He doesn't do it for a living, but he has that ability, as does half of his family. And so, we met, we fell in love. I knew that he thought he was a psychic and that his family thought that they were psychics. None of them, again, did it for a living. They just had this ability. But I guess I just thought that was part of their charming first-generation American Italian background. So I didn't take it very seriously.
Do you hear a phone ringing?
I sure do, okay, and I don't know what that is.
Let me stop that. I'm going to... it's John calling back in. I have two Johns.
This is John Polk, owner of A1 Action Entertainment and A1 Action.
Okay.
I didn't do
John,
that.
Are you still with us?
There was a
That's
ghost.
all right.
How does that
I
happen?
promise.
There's a ghost in the machine. Anyway, so you get the idea of how I got dragged into this belief system. But the thing that I like to tell people is the story of how my husband and I met, because I think it really typifies the difference between how someone who's psychic can get something entirely different out of an evening than somebody who is psychic.
Okay,
and
sounds good.
So I like to tell that story. So more than 20 years ago, almost close to 25, I was working as a freelance writer, and I was called up, and I was assigned to do an article where I was to interview a local psychic medium. And, of course, the first thing I do is roll my eyes and go, well, okay, I'm a professional writer. Whoever they send me to, I'm going to go and do my best job. So I went out, I sat down, I started interviewing this woman, and I was actually kind of surprised. She was incredibly intelligent, very articulate, and she wasn't the nutcase that I thought she was going to be. And toward the end of the interview, I decided to be a little bit of a Weisenheimer, and I said to her, well, you know what? If you're a psychic, tell me who I'm going to marry. And she just kind of sat back and she smiled, and she said, well, you know, I run psychic development classes once a week. You're welcome to visit whenever you're ready. And I went, oh, okay, thank you. And I'm thinking, well, that was she really deflected my question there. So I handed my story in, and I forgot about the invitation for about a year. And then suddenly one night, I don't know why, that invitation kind of bubbled up in my mind, and I thought, you know what? I have nothing to do this evening. It would be kind of fun to check this out. So I rang her doorbell. It was the night of the psychic development class. She answered. To my great surprise, she remembered who I was. Remember, we'd only met once before, a year before, for about an hour.
Wow.
So she welcomed me in, and she started introducing me to all her regular students, because most of them had been going to see her for years. And I start shaking a lot of hands and, getting a lot of names and forgetting a lot of names. And I stayed for the class, and I was very surprised. Again, I was an obnoxious skeptic. That it was kind of fun. We were doing some interesting exercises, and it was kind of fun. And so I decided I'd come back again. But that's all I got out of that evening. Now let's kind of reel it back a little bit, and we'll talk about what my future husband, Stephen, got out of that same evening. Because one of the hands I shook that evening belonged to him. And to understand this, I need to explain something about physics. As you probably are aware, and this is not theory, this is accepted, every human being has an electromagnetic field, and they vibrate at their own individual rate, almost like a fingerprint. So some psychics can read that when they touch you. Okay? So the class is over. Steve rushes home to his parents, very excited, and he announces to them that he's met the woman he's going to marry. Now, how did he know that? Because we didn't even have a conversation that night. All he did was shake my hand. So here's the explanation. He told me later on, and thank God he didn't tell me at the time or he would have scared me off, that whenever he shakes somebody's hand, there's usually a spike of energy while his vibrational rate adjusts to theirs. When he shook my hand, for the first time in his life, there was no spike. We were vibrating at the same rate. And in his mind, that meant we were soulmates and that we would someday marry. And I guess he was right, because about a year later we did get married.
Wow.
So he and I got something entirely different out of that evening. What's that?
What happened in between? So you met there.
Well, we dated. Yeah, well, we started dating.
Did he ask you, or did you ask him?
It was kind of a mutual thing. He's very shy. And he's particularly shy. He was particularly shy with women, because he was one of those guys where a woman would say to him, "Oh, Steve, I like you so much. Let's just be friends." So he was kind of like, men can really get their ego shattered, and he'd been through that a lot. So I think that I went to the class every week. We started chatting. This was a very crazy class because after they had their psychic development class, they'd go out dancing. It was a fun teacher.
Okay.
So he and I would sit, go dancing, and then we'd sit and chat. And after about a month of that, I think I looked at him and I said, "I just want you to know something." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Well, if you ask me out, I'll say yes." And so he did. But I knew that if I didn't say that, he was so shy, it was just never going to happen, But
wow.
He didn't tell me about the handshake until well after we were dating, which was wise because it would have kind of freaked me out.
John, do you have a question?
I do. Let's just dive right into the book if you wish. Sightseeing in the Undiscovered Country. So more than 100 paranormal stories involving your husband Stephen, his family, and friends.
That's
could
the
you
first
point
book.
out some of the
The second book is it's not family.
Oh, okay. So anyway, can you highlight maybe the most profound or the most influential stories that may have changed your life within those 100 paranormal stories?
Well, the story that was a tipping point for me in the first book was something that happened after we were married for about 5 years. It was the first time where I said, "Oh, wow, I really can't explain this away. There is something here. I don't know what it is, but it's time for me to lose the bad attitude and start looking at this thing more objectively." And that happened at my father's funeral. And I should preface this by saying that it wasn't what happened the day of my father's funeral that made me go, "Oh, my God." It was something that happened 1 week later. But I have to set that up.
Okay.
Let me close the window because there's a lot of thunder and lightning outside. There we go.
Oh, okay.
It's a little mood music there. Okay, so when my father passed, I helped my mother with the funeral arrangements. And as you can well imagine, when someone you care about has died, you don't have very good critical thinking at that point. So I did something that didn't make any sense. I called up the pastor who had been at our church when I was growing up. I knew that this gentleman would know my father, and I didn't want a stranger to be giving a eulogy. But what I had forgotten was that he had probably been retired for about 15 years. He was in his 80s. And he hadn't officiated at anything for quite some time. But his wife was thrilled that we remembered him, and she said, "I will send him over." And, of course, he was thrilled that somebody remembered him. So the day of the wake, he came in and he said, "I'd appreciate it if everyone could sit down. I'd like to say a few words." And so I sat down between my mother and my husband, and the minister began to speak. And we realized after the first 5 minutes that he had lost his focus, and it was kind of a random presentation. But he was such a nice old gentleman. Everyone sat there very politely and listened. And after about 15 minutes of this, my husband leaned over and whispered into my ear, "I see your father standing next to the minister. His arms are crossed, and he's tapping his foot. He looks very impatient." And that was an interesting thing to hear, but, like that to me was not like, "Oh, my God." The "oh, my God" came a week later. We hadn't had a chance to talk to his youngest brother, who's also quite psychic. And so because we hadn't had a chance to talk to him, he called us a week later. And he said, "Louisa, I didn't want to say anything the day of the funeral, but a week has passed and there's something I would like you to know." And I said, "Okay, what?" And he said, "Well, while the minister was speaking at the funeral, I saw your father standing next to him. His arms were crossed, he was tapping his foot, and he looked very impatient." Now that completely blew me away, because now I have two people who hadn't spoken to each other who saw precisely the same thing that nobody else could see. And that was kind of the beginning of my saying, "Oh my gosh, there's really something going on here. I don't know what it is, but it's time for me to start looking at it more objectively and not have such an attitude about it."
Fascinating. Well, I heard that people attend their funerals. Have you been able to verify that? over time?
I'm sorry. It's believe it or not, it is raining so hard here. You're going to have to speak up.
Okay, I pulled the mic directly up to my mouth. I have a tin roof house, so if it ever rains here, I can't hear anything either. So why that people tend to stick around until their funerals? Have you heard that, and if so, have you been able to verify that?
Do people attend their own funerals? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Apparently that's the case. Actually, my mother died this past February, and I was wondering if she was at the funeral home. And both my husband and one of the guests, who's a friend of ours, who's psychic, came over to me separately and said, "I just want you to know your mother's outside at the front door greeting everyone as they come in," which is exactly what my mother would have done because she was a very outgoing woman, and finally she got out of the body that she'd been in, and she was probably having a ball. There's a story in.
For you, though. To greet everybody as you're coming to your funeral.
Oh yeah. And there's another story rather, in my second book, where this young lady really didn't want to attend her uncle's funeral. She hadn't been very close to him. And so she had an allergy appointment that day anyway. She lived in, I think, Brooklyn. So she walked to her allergy appointment instead of going to the wake. And on the way back from her appointment, she saw her uncle walking beside her, and he was in a brown suit with a particular type of tie and shoes on, and he didn't say anything. He just walked beside her. And when she was totally freaked out by it. And when she got home, she described to her mother what her uncle had looked like, and her mother just kind of looked at her and said that was what he was wearing in the casket. So, I mean, what were the chances? So
right.
that was kind of interesting. And I guess, I theorized at the end of the story that maybe, he was wondering where she was. He'd gone to his funeral and he didn't see her there, So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, I'll go get you. Interesting. I have like one more question. I'll pass it back to John. So, what is your most, your top 2 or 3 reports that you've had that really boggle your mind and help convince you that this is real?
Well, I'd have to say the process of writing these 2 books was a tipping point for me in going from feeling like it was likely to feeling like, oh my gosh, this is such a part of the human experience. This is a little bit more than likely. I have a number of stories I can tell you that I found very interesting. If you'd like me to just kind of go through them.
Oh, that'd be great. Yes, and then we'll get the ball back to John to ask you questions.
All right. I'm going to tell you, let's see, 2 stories that I find interesting, and then there's one story that you could consider a little scary. My experience is that about 90% of psychic experiences are loving and comforting, and then there's that 10% that's a little bit scary. So I had one chapter in my second book called Ghosts Behaving Badly, and the last story will be from that. But the first one is going to be a real estate story, and this is from Barb, who is a national radio talk show host, and she was looking for a smaller home because she'd gone through a divorce, and she's a very psychic woman, so she picks up on things. She found a house that she was looking at. It was a single-story, cream-colored craftsman-style home, very charming. And she went there with the real estate agent, and they walked through the kitchen and the great room. And she told the real estate agent, wow, I really like this house. It's very nice. The only thing she couldn't understand was why all the electrical outlets were higher on the wall than normal. And at that point, the agent had to take a call and suggested Barb look at the rest of the house on her own while he finished the call. So she started looking around. She wandered into the master bedroom, and she was a little bit surprised because she saw a man sitting in a wheelchair. He was balding, wore wireframe glasses, and looked to be about in his 60s. And she said he just looked very sweet with a very nice smile, and she apologized profusely for invading his privacy because she didn't realize he was still in the house. And he said not to worry. He introduced himself and explained he was the owner of the house. Then he proceeded to tell her about the history of the house, as well as his dog and his family. And he finally said when he was finished talking to her, you're a really lovely person with great energy. I would love for you to buy the house. And at that point, Barb turned and saw the real estate agent in the doorway behind her, and she turned to face him. He asked who she was talking with, and when Barb turned back to point to the owner, he was gone. The agent stared at her. He was not happy. She also proceeded to tell him that the owner had told her that the electrical outlets were higher on the walls so he could reach them in his wheelchair. She told the real estate agent about the history of the house, the dog, the family, and he grabbed her by the arm, pulled her out of the house, and said, "Don't ever do that again." And she said, "What are you talking about?" And he told her that apparently all the details from her conversation were accurate. The only problem was that the owner had died 6 months prior, and it was his family who had put the house on the market. I thought that was kind of a cute story. She totally freaked out the real estate agent. So that's an owner that would prefer not to leave the house, but certainly there was nothing negative about him. He was a very sweet man. He just was still hanging out for a while. The next story comes from a chapter in my second book called Not So Imaginary Friends, which is a chapter on the invisible friends that children have. And this story goes a little bit above and beyond the average invisible friend story, which is what made it so interesting to me. And this is from Christine, who's an export-import coordinator. And she had a little daughter. She still does, but her daughter isn't little anymore. But when her daughter, Marlena, was, about 4 or 5 years old, she, like most everyone else in the family, was very psychic. She was shy. She would play in her bedroom by herself with her dolls. She had the typical little girl's room with a little table with a tea set on it, and across from her chair was a miniature rocking chair, and it was, a nice little place for her to play with her dolls. And her room was situated at the top of the basement stairs so that whenever Christine was coming upstairs with laundry, she could look in and just check up on her daughter and see how she was doing. So one day, Christine was coming up from the basement with wash in her arms, and she glanced up into Marlena's open bedroom door. And what she saw was her daughter sitting on the floor, handing her Barbie doll to someone in the rocking chair. The chair was moving, and when she handed the doll over, it was suspended in the air. When Christine entered the room, everything stopped and the doll dropped onto the floor. And she said to her daughter, Marlena, a little nervously, "Who are you giving this doll to?" And her daughter replied, "Mommy, don't you see? There's a little girl sitting in the chair." So I thought, well, that's a little bit above and beyond the average story on, invisible friends. So I like that one a lot.
Yeah. And it's always fun when that happens.
Actually, I have
to talk to. Okay, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
My mother used to talk to somebody, and I'd see my mother talking to somebody, and then I'd bust her on it, and she'd deny me. But eventually, we got it out of her that she was talking to her mother.
Okay, so good for her that she had that type of contact. Yeah, I mean, to me, that's a gift.
Yeah.
I actually have two more stories. One is about a woman whose dreams have a tendency to come true, and then the last one is the scary story. This is from Linda, who is a wax specialist. I'm not exactly sure what that is. I didn't ask her, but that's when I asked her for her job title, that's what she gave me. Now, Linda is someone who initially wasn't. She would always get these dreams of things that were going to happen. And she didn't take them seriously until this one particular dream, and that was a turning point for her. Now, one night she had this horrible nightmare. She dreamed that her husband and she were sitting in a bar, and a man came in with a gun and started shooting. And they both dropped to the floor, and she couldn't find her husband, and she started screaming. And she screamed so loud that her husband woke her up. And he finally calmed her down, and he said, "It's okay, you're home. There's no man with a gun. Don't worry about it." So they forgot about it. That weekend, they decided to go into Philadelphia to meet some friends at a bar. And, they finally got seated. I guess there was a line to get in. And they got their drinks. And just as they were being served, she got this urgent feeling, and she said, "We have to leave right now." And her husband looks at her, and he goes, "I'd like to finish my beer." And she said, "No, you don't have time to finish your beer. We have to leave right now." So everyone was kind of like, "Okay, Linda, we'll leave right now." And so they walked out of the bar, left their drinks behind them. And as they were walking out, they saw two men in the parking lot fighting over a woman. One of them got angry and walked away. And so they just continued walking down the block. And when they got about a block away, they heard gunshots and turned around and saw people flooding out of the club and screaming and running down the street. And they ran ahead of them. What they found the next day by listening to the news was that those two men who had been arguing outside the bar, the one who left came back with a gun. He was very angry, and he started shooting up the place. So she realized from that point on that if she got a dream, she needed to listen to it, and from that point on, she did.
Wow, that's awesome. Saved all their lives, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, who knows, but got them out of harm's way anyway. Okay, so this brings us to the scary story. And again, my disclaimer, these are really the exception to the rule. Most contact with the other side, we're surrounded by people who love us and care about us and are trying to comfort us. But here's an exception. This was told to me by a young lady named Lee, who was 16 years old when this happened. She and her family moved to a rental home in Tunstall, which is in northern England, south of Manchester. And when they started moving all their belongings into the basement, Lee said to her parents, "I really don't like how it feels down here. I don't want to come back into this basement again." And her parents said, "Well, don't worry about it. We're just storing stuff here. You're not going to have to come back to the basement." And so she was like, "Okay, good." However, this is where little brothers can be really annoying, okay? So she and her little brother were playing a game called Truth or Dare. She lost, and her brother turns to her and knowing that she doesn't like the basement, says, "I dare you to go down to the basement and no flashlight allowed." So, of course, you can't back down if it's your little brother, right? I mean, you have to do it. So, she kind of steeled herself and descended into the basement without a flashlight. And despite the lack of lighting, she saw a dark figure sitting on one of the boxes. So she did what I think I would probably do in the same situation. She screamed and ran up the stairs. Now, she said to her brother, "Hey, there's someone in the basement. I don't want to go down there again." So her brother went, "Oh, sure there is." He got a flashlight. He went down into the basement, and he saw nothing. So after that, Lee decided, okay, that's it. Never going to the basement again. Don't care if he didn't see anything. I did. And for several months, that was fine. She didn't go into the basement. But then one day her parents said, "Hey, we're giving a party. Our punch bowl is stored in the basement. Please go down and get it." And she had never told them about what had happened, so she didn't exactly have an excuse not to go down. So she went down into the basement, found the box, had it in her arms, turned around, and saw the figure again with a woman in his arms. The woman looked dead. He laid her on the floor and started digging a hole. Well, she ran upstairs with that box, and she still didn't say anything to her parents. Her 16-year-old way of dealing with the problem was that she shut and locked the basement door and decided, that's it, never going down there again. Well, later that night, she heard a scratching noise in the house that made her jump. She went over to the basement door and found it open. When she looked at the door and the walls, there were scratch marks everywhere. And she thought to herself, what's causing that? Then her brother, who also had heard the scratching, saw the scratch marks all over the door and went downstairs with a flashlight and saw someone in the basement. And now he finally believed her. They tried to talk to their parents about it, but in the very British way of dealing with things, they would have none of it. So she decided she was going to solve the problem on her own. This is not something I would recommend to your listeners, but this is what she did. One afternoon when she was alone in the house, she decided to communicate with the entity in the basement with a Ouija board. And she said to the board, whoever's in the basement, tell me your name. And it spelled out the name Mark. So she went to the library to read old newspapers to determine if someone named Mark had ever lived in her house, because it was an old house. What she found was there was a man named Mark Thomas who had lived in the house in 1917. Mark Thomas had brutally murdered his girlfriend and buried her in the basement. She saw a photo of the girlfriend who had died, and this woman looked eerily like herself.
Ooh.
So that's the scary story.
Do you think it was her? Do you think it was her reincarnated by any chance, Louisa?
I don't know if it was that. I don't know if it was that because she looked so much like the girlfriend that kind of brought him out. I honestly don't know what, we can only speculate really, but it could be any of those things.
Wow, interesting.
Heavy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a fun story.
That is.
But, yeah, I really enjoyed chatting.
That was her. I was getting that was her, just like a psychic.
It might have. That's absolutely a possibility. And if it is, I can understand why she was freaked out. It's not what I said earlier, but I didn't include it earlier. But her parents, within 2 years of that, were convinced by a local psychic that it was not a good idea for them to stay in that house. So they did find out.
Oh, good parents. They got a new house. Well, I had a similar thing. I saw a woman in my parents' house in the basement, and she was sitting there crying on a bed, like a metal frame. She was dressed like sometime in the last, not this past century, but the 19th century, and she was sobbing. There was blood everywhere.
Oh.
So then Princess Diana died, and that night I was chatting to somebody on AOL chat, how long ago it was, and he said he was a psychic, and we were talking about ghosts, and then he said, I told him about my parents' house, and I said, okay, and I didn't tell him anything. I just said that my parents' house is haunted. She came down to the house, met my sister and I, and the house was closed up because my parents went home and my sister hadn't moved back in yet. And so he makes a beeline to a couple places, but he went to the basement door. He goes, there's something down here. So we went down to the basement, and he said, oh, there's a woman in this room. She's sitting on a cot. She's crying, and he said, there's blood everywhere. And he said, and right here, there's 3 bodies.
Oh, wow.
We didn't get up anything and dig it up, but my sister lives in that house to this day. So, Lord, it's a dirt floor. It could very well be bodies under there. They never paved it or nothing. It's an original 1840s farmhouse, dirt floor in the basement. Yeah. Well,
one of the reasons why I decided to write the 2 anthologies of stories is because I just find these fascinating. I mean, I could just sit and talk ghost stories all night and, and near-death experiences and things like that. And I like reading about them, so I figure other people probably do, too.
Well, they do. I don't know about you, but I used to love to, have sleepovers with my friends, my girlfriends, and we'd sit up for hours telling ghost stories. Did either you ever do that? Well, you didn't believe in ghosts. So what did you tell when you were a kid? I
didn't do that when I was younger. Although I remember when I was in high school, a couple of friends and I decided to do a Ouija board, and some things started coming through, and I was thinking they were pushing it. I'm like, oh, come on, you guys are pushing it, but they weren't. And my 2 friends got so freaked out, they said, we're not doing this anymore.
What came through? Do you remember?
Yeah.
Yeah? Was it too scary to talk about?
Well, I'll give you a sample of one thing that happened that I thought was fascinating, but it freaked them out. We actually got a message from somebody who was alive through the Ouija board. We had a teacher who we liked a lot, but she was sickly, and she was homesick, and she had an unlisted telephone number, and the Ouija board gave us her unlisted telephone number, and one of us called, and she wanted to know where we got the number from.
Oh, my goodness.
So that was, I think, that wasn't what freaked my friends out. Apparently there were things going on that I wasn't aware of because I was not very perceptive. I wasn't looking for things. And they just felt like it wasn't a good idea to continue doing this stuff.
Fascinating. John, do you have a question?
I do. I have probably 10 years worth of ghost stories. So, but the show's not about me, but I'm going to tell a short one, and then
great,
and then move on to astrology charts and you interpreting them. But about 10 years ago, there was a girl who was living with me in my home. Her and her 2 daughters. And we were very much in love, and she was very, very spiritual. And I knew that her moving into my house. And her daughters were young at this point. They were probably, I don't know, 3 and 10, 3 and 9, something like that. And they were totally at peace knowing that ghosts were alive and well and that it wasn't a big deal. You know, I mean, the daughters. Oh, yeah.
That's cool.
You know, and you send out love and you get love back. You can send out fear, you get fear back. So we were all on the same page with that. Otherwise, I would never let them move into the house. But they move into my house, and prior to that, you know, my girlfriend, I told her, and she knew this anyway. She was very psychic herself and very in tune with the other side. But I told her, when you move into the house, the spiritual activity is going to ramp up exponentially. Because when you put a medium in a house that is a vortex, and my house is a vortex because it was built on top of an Indian reservation.
Oh my God!
And then you put 2 mediums in the house, her and myself, and they've done research on this, where, you know, if they're using EMR or EMF or different, you know, equipment to detect if there's anomalies in the room, they can. There's bandwidth to it also. So you get to an area of concentration where the ley lines all cross, the meridians all cross, and there's a vortex there. Well, there's a vortex in my house.
Okay.
And, yeah, and it's a total trip. I mean, ghosts live here with me, and we commune together, and we have a loving relationship with each other. But anyway, so one night we're in my bedroom, girl and I, and we're just talking, and we hear drums. We hear drums as if they were Indians playing drums. So I'd never heard it before either. And I had lived there for probably 4 years prior to her moving in with me. So we're walking around, you know, asking the girls if they're playing drums. No, we don't even have drums. So then we're out in the yard. We're walking around in the yard, and it's late at night, and we can't hear any of the neighbors playing drums. So we just kind of blow it off. And we go back into the bedroom and hear the drums again. Like, okay,
they follow you wherever you go.
Yeah, and it didn't scare us, which was a good thing. It was just letting us know that he was there, or they were there, I should say. So we all go to sleep, and then the next morning, you know, I got to get up and go to work, and then I come home, and I start to tell, you know, my girlfriend at the time, I say, you know, I had this dream where I see 2 shaman and a medicine man, and they're kind of down on their haunches, crouched over a kettle that's, you know, suspended over a fire, and they're throwing roots and, you know, leaves and whatever they're throwing in there to make some kind of magic elixir. And I kind of had the feeling that it was some kind of medicine, some kind of magical potion or something like that. And I see this girl's eyes just start to, you know, beam out like saucers. Her eyes got huge. All the color in her eyes went away. All I could see were just 2 dark pupils. And I'm like, what? What's going on? She said, my daughter had the exact same dream.
Oh,
I'm like,
interesting.
You're kidding. She's like, no, the oldest daughter had the same dream. So I'm like, well, let's go talk to her about it. Right around the time I said, let's go talk to her about it, she starts beating frantically on the door. And, you know, go and open the door. What's wrong? She's like, there's nothing wrong, but there's something in my room. And I was like, well, let's not go run in there. All right. How do you feel about it? she said, it feels, and this is like a 10-year-old little girl, and she said, it feels like it's my friend. And so I said, I tell you what, as a family, let's go get your little sister. Let's all walk in there together.
That's so
we
cool.
and we all walk in there together, and all four of us, me, my girlfriend, the two daughters, we see a huge ghost. And you could make out, usually you can't always make out a head and shoulders and a body, but you can still see the signature of something there, or bent light or an orb or something.
Right.
But this one was huge, and I just had this massive, for lack of a word, ghost-like body. Couldn't really pick out a whole lot of facial features or hair or anything like that, but you could definitely see the outline of a male figure. And so now I start to dig inside myself and start to dig inside of it to see what I feel, what it is. And it felt very positive and benevolent and loving and protective to me. And I said, how does everybody else? I said, how does everybody else feel? And even the 3 or 4 year old at the time, we all agreed. And I said, the oldest daughter, I said, well, he is a protector of all of us, but he follows you. He was with you before he was with us. So
interesting.
I'm not going to say he belongs to you, but he's here for you and us. But I want you to give him a name. And I said, don't force it, just allow something to come to you. So she gives him the name Blake. And so Blake lived in the house with us until they moved out. I'm not with this lady anymore. She's since been remarried and is happy, and I've talked to her after the fact about this exact story we're talking about now, because I put it in my book that I wrote.
Cool.
I mean, how can you not put this story in the book?
Oh, yeah. That's fascinating, isn't it?
It was totally fascinating. It was, and things like that happen to me every day.
You sound like my husband.
Unless I'm busy working, or if I have a bunch of people at my house, I kind of tune it out. If I have a lot of internet stuff to do, internet will just tune it out completely. But okay, so that's one of a million awesome ghost stories I have. But now let's turn it back to you, Louisa.
Okay.
I want to ask you a question.
Can I make a statement about something before you go into the?
Yes.
One of the books that I researched when I was doing, actually both of my books. I have stuff from her in both of my books. Dr. Diane Hennessy Powell is a neuropsychiatrist who taught at Harvard Medical School. And because of an experience she had as a child, she was very curious about paranormal experiences. And so as a scientist, she started reviewing what she felt were legitimate studies that had been done on psychic phenomena. And she wrote the book, The ESP Enigma, The Scientific Case for Psychic Phenomena. And one of the things that she suggested from all of the studies that she reviewed was that people who are psychic have a brain and spinal system, a nervous system, that is much more sensitive than that of the average person. And that tends to be inherited. So if somebody is psychic, it's quite likely that there are other people in their family who are psychic. Maybe not everyone, but a lot of people. Now, she felt, based on what she had seen, that about 90% of people who are psychic inherit it. But there's another small percentage of people who become psychic when a trauma adjusts that brain nervous system antenna. And the 3 examples I like to give, the first one is a gentleman named George Anderson, who, when he was a young child, had a very bad reaction to the chicken pox, and his brain swelled, and the doctors told his family that they didn't know if he was going to survive, and if he did, he might not be all there because it was brain swelling. Well, he survived just fine. There was only one difference after he became well again, and that was that he could see dead people as easily as he could see the living. So his brain and nervous system antenna was adjusted by all the brain swelling. A second person who had a trauma that adjusted his brain was Peter Hurkos, who's a very famous psychic in the Netherlands. And he wasn't born psychic. He was up on his roof on a ladder one day working, fell backwards, hit his head, and from that point on, he was psychic. A third fellow, and this fellow is fairly well known. His name is Joseph McMoneagle, and he was in the U.S. military remote viewing program, which was a program funded by the U.S. military for many years, where psychics looked at people in places overseas to try to get intelligence information. And he wasn't psychic until he had a near-death experience, and when he returned, suddenly he was psychic. So that's kind of interesting to me. And one other thing that she had to say about psychics I thought was kind of interesting in a slightly demoralizing way, and that is that she believes, and I've not only read this from her scientific material, but also I've heard this from a lot of psychics, that psychic ability represents an evolution of the brain. So people who are psychic are actually more evolved than people who are not. And of course, this is a little demoralizing to me because now I have to admit that my husband is more evolved than I am. And I mean, whoever wants to have to say that?
Whoever wants to admit that? Not my husband. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, really.
That's funny.
Of all people. That's funny.
Yeah, well, that's cute. I've had a number of near-death experiences, so maybe that explains it, because I'm very psychic, and my NDE started when I was very, very young.
That tends to enhance your ability. You know,
right.
My husband had his first NDE when he was, I guess, a teenager, and after that, it was like, oh boy, roller coaster ride.
Wow. Since you're psychic, John, have you had any NDEs?
Oh, at least, I was telling Louisa this yesterday, at least 25 that I have chronicled and written about. Yeah, they're amazing.
25 near-death experiences?
Yeah, minimum.
We're talking about near-death experiences. What made you die 25 times?
What happens is it's kind of scary what has happened to me. Out of all of those, I would say over half of them, I can't breathe. I get to the point where I can't breathe, and instead of blacking out, I start to white out. I feel like, brain damage is imminent. I'm about to fall and collapse on the floor, and it's triggered by different things. One time it happened to me when I was out surfing.
Oh, wow.
I mean,
not a good place to be.
Yeah, you could easily write that off as, well, you were surfing. You could have drowned just like any normal human. But my
but not
passage,
you, no.
Well, my air passage went from being totally clogged and waterlogged also. The classic case of coming up for that last desperate gasp of air, and you just breathe in a whole nother wave of water. Salt water, mind you, also. And it completely just floods your lungs. Your lungs get completely inundated with water. I couldn't breathe. My best friend, we're out too far for him to really try and save me the way he wanted to save me. And then all of a sudden I could just breathe out of nowhere. I mean, out of nowhere, something magically just removed the water from my lungs, and I was able to breathe perfectly. And ironically, I was an opening speaker at a UFO conference, and the lady that put it on, her name's Audrey Starborn-Hewins, she almost died in the exact same spot like 20 years later.
Interesting.
In Daytona Beach, Florida, which is where I grew up. Actually, Ormond Beach, which nobody's really even heard of. But when she told her story, I'm like, do you realize I grew up in $1 million condo right down the street from there? And that's where I started to get abducted by aliens also. That's where my abductions began. And then another one was I was at my grandfather's funeral. He passed in 2009, and I was just crying. I was just crying a river. I was crying an ocean, a universe of tears. My name is John Marcus Polk. My grandfather's name was John Marcus Polk. I'm at the wake before the funeral. And, I touch his hand, and I start crying, and my grandmother is there, and everybody's crying. And all of a sudden, I cannot breathe. Same thing. I'm scary out of my mind. And my brother comes up to me, and he was about to call 911 and call the paramedics and everything. I was about to fall on the floor. Same case scenario. I start to white out, and then all of a sudden, I don't know what it was. Something divine happened, and all of a sudden, I could breathe again.
Wow.
It was. It's scary. I as positive as my supernatural experiences are, those are not. they scare me out of my mind, and I've gone through that too many times to the point where I know something, and I know what it is also. I've had psychic mediums come to my house, and that's another story to try and get rid of that something that is attached to me. But all right,
that's what happens. Do you mind if I tell a near-death experience story?
Hey, we're talking.
Your story reminded me of another one.
Let's do it.
I'm sorry, I just have so many stories in these books that it's kind of fun to tell them. But this one's from Laura Lynn, who lives in North Carolina, and she has a PhD in, I guess, religious studies, and she has had mystical experiences her entire life. But this happened when she was very, very young. Now, as you know, water is often associated with life and spirituality, and early on, both symbols proved true for Laura Lynn. When she was 3, she lived on a river in North Carolina. They lived in a small rural town, and she didn't know how to swim, so whenever she went out the door, she had to wear a red and white striped life jacket. At the age of 3, that's a good idea. And one day, like a normal kid, in her haste, she ran outside to play, and she left her life jacket behind. Now, there was a long pier that went out into the river near her house. So she decided to walk to the end of the pier. And when she got to the end, she looked down and she saw some steps leading to the river, and they were covered with green algae. And she decided, hey, those steps are there, I got to walk on them. And when she walked down the steps, the algae was slippery. She slipped and fell into the water. Now, her older brother, who was trained in CPR, was playing on the shoreline and saw what happened. But it was a long way from the beach to the end of the pier. So he ran as fast as he could to get to her. Now, she says she panicked for a short time because she was underwater, and then she suddenly began to relax and feel very calm. She saw a very bright light begin to come to her through the water. It was an intense golden color, much brighter than the light that might shine through the water from the sun. She was completely at peace, floating there with the light beaming down on her, and she absolutely surrendered to it. Then suddenly, she felt her brother jerk her out of the water and perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. She threw up and water came out of her lungs, and she realized that her brother saved her. She was happy to be back, but not terribly upset from the experience. She recalls it was absolute bliss. It was just a beautiful experience. But unlike many survivors of near-death experiences, she had not seen her life flash before her prior to being revived. And then again, at the age of 3, there most likely wasn't a great deal of life to review.
Oh, that was... Well, that's typical. Yeah. I've had that happen.
I just thought it was pretty cute because, I mean, here's a 3-year-old. How much life is going to be flashing before her eyes? Yeah. But,
I understand. Well, what happened when I was 4, just as a little aside, I actually went into all my previous lives. So it was like, because I was so young, it was just life in comparison to other lives. And like, do I stay or come back? These decisions. Okay, do you have another one? That's great.
I could tell you stories all night. It's up to you what you would like to hear. Okay. You know, I have a wonderful story from my sister-in-law. She married into the family, but she just happens to be very psychic. I'm like the only one. But she had no, because you know, it's funny. People ask me a lot now. Are you more psychic? No, I'm not. Do you feel left out? No, one psychic in the family is fine. And since I'm not used to seeing dead people, if I saw one, it would completely freak me out. So, you know, I'm more than happy to let him be the psychic in the house. Mm-hmm. But this is a story from my sister-in-law. And our mother-in-law, my husband's mother, was just a lovely woman. She was a very devout Catholic, but she also believed in reincarnation. And her mother had been extremely psychic, so she was kind of used to the psychic thing. It didn't bother her at all. So unfortunately, our mother-in-law got leukemia and passed away about a year before some of the medicines that can help you survive with leukemia came out, which was kind of sad, and we all miss her. But one day, my sister-in-law Francine was driving to work, and she stopped at a light, and she remembers when she stopped at the light, there were 2 lanes of traffic going in the direction that she was going to go in, through the intersection. And the car to her left was a large green minivan. And just as the light turned, you have to understand this is New Jersey. If the light turns, you hit the gas, you're gone. that's the culture here. So the light turned, but just as the light turned and she was about to hit the gas, she looked into the rearview mirror and saw our mother-in-law, Connie, sitting there. And she also looked down at her hand and saw Connie's wedding ring on her hand instead of her own. And she was so stunned that she didn't hit the gas. She just sat there being stunned. And suddenly she heard a crash in front of her, a very loud crash. The minivan had been a normal New Jersey driver and hit the gas, went into the intersection, and got broadsided by a large truck. And so this was very upsetting to Francine. She pulled the car over to the side of the road and started shaking because she knew that if she had been hit by that truck, she would have been decapitated. She had a small car. So she looked back into the rearview mirror, and Connie was gone. But to this day, she knows in her heart that Connie was there to keep her from going through the intersection so she wouldn't get killed.
Wow. Wasn't her time. That's
it was not
awesome.
Her time, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, this is the type of thing that Francine and, she's married to Steve's youngest brother. He's also psychic. It's quite a family. And their son is psychic as well, their little son. He sees crazy stuff, too. So it's quite a family.
They talk about it when they have their family reunions. Are you sitting around and they're telling all these stories?
Everybody talks very openly about it. There's only one brother who does not feel comfortable with it. For some reason, he just isn't comfortable with it. Some people aren't. And that's certainly not a negative statement about him. Everyone's entitled to their viewpoint and their feelings. But normally everyone else in the family will just sit and tell their stories, which is how I got the idea for writing the first book. I just figured, well, heck, I'm going to write down Steve's stories, his family stories. Then we had lots of friends. I wrote down their stories, and then they had friends, and that was the first book. And the second book is actually, I don't really know too many people in the second book. They were just people who came to me during book signings or sent me fan letters.
Oh, I see.
Or were friends of friends. And, I mean, there was the one who's farthest away was a fellow who's a Maori from New Zealand, and he was a real trip to interview, just an entirely different culture. So, it's very, very interesting. It was very to talk to all these people, and they were so kind to share their stories with me, which totally fascinate me. I mean, I could sit and, I have a background as a journalist originally, and I could sit and interview people and take down their stories, forever. I could just sit and do that. I really enjoy it.
That's fascinating. Now, since you interviewed a person, at least one by who from a completely different culture, do you find that the ghosts and NDE experiences vary based on the culture of the storyteller?
Well, his stories didn't have to do with NDEs, but they did have to do with spirits that he saw and his way of reacting to them. And he had some wonderful insights. In addition to telling people stories, I asked them questions, about how do they feel about what they're telling me or what they believe or what they see or how other people react to it. And he had some wonderful insights to share. So it was really a lot of fun interviewing him.
What were some of the things he shared?
Well, let's see. I have to go to the back of the book and look. He was actually the last one he was one of the last people, his stories came last because I found him so interesting that I saved him for last. And his occupation, by the way, is surfer/philosopher, which I found really fun. But one of the questions I asked him was, let's see, I mean, philosophically, he was very interesting. What is your understanding of how the universe works is one of the questions I asked him. And he answered, we are spiritual light beings, enlightened already. We at first are given lifetimes and paths that we cannot change. Then after we progress through levels, we have more control over what we do as far as these paths are concerned. I am very old. I chose to return and help. So I thought that was kind of interesting. He also had some interesting stories about his childhood and things that he saw that most children might not find that comforting, but he seemed to handle it very well. I could tell you one of his stories, which I found interesting simply because I just found it kind of amusing in a sense, but also it kind of opened a different way of looking at reality. That's his story called Day Tripping. The most unusual psychic experience, Johnny, that's the name of this fellow, that's not his real Maori name, but that's the name he's adopted.
Right.
It's someone in our culture. Can recall was taking a short visit home and returning. Now, he takes these type of trips often. He said at his level, some of us do, some of us don't. So they can basically step from this side to the other side whenever they feel like it. And that's what he was doing. He said it's not a near-death experience. He was well unconscious. It was just a day trip from the physical plane. And I said, well, what did you see there? And he said, I recall being back home in a place where everything floats, where there are groups of stars, twinkling lights at different levels. Music whispers through the air, and love flows like a tangible river. I was talking to the other light souls, communicating, then brought my mind back to this plane. So, of course, the next question I had to ask him was, well, wow, after such an incredibly mystical experience, I can't help but wonder what great lesson you brought back. And his answer was very, very zen. He said, what did I learn? How to make a cup of tea. And I just thought that was very funny. Like, it was such a typical answer from him that, I just thought that was really interesting. But that's from my second book.
Is there a mystical way to make a cup of tea that's different than the normal way to make a cup of tea?
Well, that question didn't occur to me. I just found his answer so amusing that it was great. It was just like typically him, because he often speaks in riddles, like to try to understand what he's trying to say to you, and then it's almost like he's not going to explain it any further. If you don't get it, then that's too bad,
That's
so
too bad.
He's just a very interesting man. But I had 3 or 4 stories from him at the end of the first book. I just found him a very, very interesting person. It sounds like
a fascinating series of books. I've enjoyed
a lot of fun to write.
Stories. Those are like it's a good book to have in the doctor's office, right? You don't have the time to read a whole novel. But there was one of those chicken soup ones that was these stories, and I was going to a chiropractor on a regular basis, and that's like, well, I have to come back in 2 weeks so I can get the rest of the stories. So
exactly,
a very good book to put like on the seat of the toilet or beside the toilet in a little magazine holder.
and I'm very happy to say that I found out in May that my second book won 2 national awards, which was kind of nice because it makes me feel like, I don't only write things that interest me, but somebody else thought they were okay to read. So that was kind of nice.
Yeah, that's great when people get what you're doing and they appreciate it and like it. So they both sound like incredible books. And I read a number of books like that, where it's story after story.
Nice. Yeah, it was particularly nice because neither one of the contests, and they're both national contests for books, was a metaphysical book contest. They were mainstream books. And people who might not normally read this sort of subject matter thought it was worth an award. So that meant a lot to me.
I agree. So, and you're going across, the belief systems. You were skeptic, so now your people read and they get it.
Well, I hope so. I mean, one of the things that I've had several reviews on my books, and one of the things that reviewers almost always say is what I liked about the book was she tells the story, she gives the viewpoint of the person who's telling the story, but she never tries to insinuate that you should believe it or tell you what to believe. It's all up to you as the reader. And that's kind of what I try to do. I'm not there to try to convince somebody to change their belief system. It's more like, wow, listen to this. This is pretty cool. You know.
But I think that way of doing it actually does shift people more than if you were trying to convince them.
Yeah, and I had a couple people on my Amazon site say, you know what, I don't believe in this stuff, but now that I've read this, I might actually consider it. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, the best you can do. John, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, if we're telling ghost stories, I got a bunch of those too. But so here we go. I met my girlfriend through a voodoo goddess of the sea.
Cool.
This is a totally trippy story. So I had been actively dating and, was active in the community, if you want to use that terminology. And I didn't really know and didn't realize it, but 3 girls in a row practiced Wicca. And the relationships were, a month or two at the most, and they were physical. They were not loving, and I was guilty of being basically a pig man. At least I can admit it. I mean, when men are alone and lonely, which I was, they do what they do to get by, and it doesn't make them right. That's for sure. And often you end up walking on a good person's heart, and that's what I did. So I do feel bad about it, but I knew that there was something wrong. So I decided I'm going to go to a psychic. A friend of mine in one of the spiritual groups that I go to, she refers me to a psychic who is from Hispaniola. And anyway, so it's cold. It's like 50 degrees here in Florida, which is cold to us. And so I'm looking in my closet, and I see my old Universal Studios jacket, and I live right down the street from Universal. And I never wear it because it's got a big hole in the armpit. But something tells me to put it on. So I put it on, and I go to this lady's apartment, and it turns out that she's a psychic that works at Universal Studios. And I'm like, right off the bat, I'm like, I never wear this jacket, and I show her the hole in the armpit. So anyway, so she starts doing tarot cards on me, which I'm not a fan of, but I'm not going to get personal, but she told me something personally about myself that I don't tell anybody because it's very painful. But when she said what she said, I'm like, I believe anything that you say. So then, she got this felt tip pen and starts filling in my hand. This is your lifeline, your love line, your career, your this, your that. And then she filled in this little corner over by my pinky, and that's where she came up with that very meticulous detail that I never told really anybody in my life except for just a few people. Anyway, she tells me that, and I told her, I'll believe anything that you say. And she says, you know what I can tell is that you are having a lot of sex, but that's not what you want. You want love. And I said, that's exactly why I'm here. And she said, well, I hate to tell you this, but you have a curse placed on you.
Oh. And
I'm like, oh my God. I knew something was wrong, but I never would have used the word curse. Mm-hmm. She said, there's a curse put on you. And she said, think about, let's see, what is it, the last 2 or 3 women that you had been intimate with? And I'm like, oh my God, they all practiced Wicca. And to me, they were all good witches. I was
going to say, somebody who practices Wicca should never be doing a negative spell. That goes against Wicca.
It does. But anyway, and I can't prove that she was correct about what she said, but I do believe her because of the way I ended everything with these 3 women right in a row also.
Wow.
So she says there is a way to lift the curse. And I'm like, I'm all ears because I know there was something wrong. I would never use the word curse, but okay, I'm all ears. She said, what you need to do is you need to go to the ocean. And I'm about an hour from the beach. She said, the goddess of the sea, her name is Jamaya with a Y. Jamaya. She's the goddess of the sea, and there's a way to appease her and present an offering to her. And if you do this, she can lift the curse. I'm like, okay, well, what do I do? She says, well, she likes honey and she likes molasses. And the psychic stops for a second. Okay, go buy a syrupy form of molasses, okay, which you use for cooking and baking and stuff, whatever. And what you do is you go to the ocean. Before you enter the ocean, rub it all over your body. I'm like, oh, okay. And literally, I'm totally serious. So she said, rub it in your hair, your face, your chest, your swimming trunks, down the hair on your legs to your feet. And when you go into the water, wash it off and pray to the goddess of Jemaya that this is my offering to you, and please, help me to lift this curse. Do it 3 times. Each time you do it, exit the water, put the molasses all over your body again, and go into the water and do it 3 times. But on the 3rd time, make sure that the trunks or whatever you're wearing is something that you owned when you were with somebody else. And take them off, and then have another pair of shorts in your pocket or something, and put those on. And then once you do it 3 times, the curse will be lifted. And I'm like, at this point, I will try anything. So you can imagine, I go to the beach, and there's a lot of people around, and I'm like, you know what? Heck with it. I'm just going to do it. I don't care if people see me do it. So on the 3rd time, I'm on the beach, and I've drawn a lot of attention. And I see this old guy with a metal detector. He's got his headphones on, and he's looking at me, and I can see him mumbling something under his voice. And I decide that I can either allow this to upset me or I can laugh. So I just laughed. I went into the water. I washed the molasses off of my body, pulled my shorts off, put on a new pair of shorts, and then got back up on the shore, said one last prayer to the goddess Jemaya, and then got in my vehicle and drove home. And I'm on my way home, and I feel very indifferent. I don't know if it worked or not. I just didn't know if it worked or not. Well, 3 days later, I got set up on a blind date, and it was too strange that I gave this blind date no credit whatsoever. I didn't think it would work. I thought it was a big waste of time. And we fell in love. I mean, we fell madly in love. It was the best love I've ever had in my life. So it worked.
Yay! Happy ending.
Yeah, that is very, very nice. I guess that was meant to be, and you got from that relationship what you needed, which is nice.
Yeah. No, it was just an unbelievable story. So the first night I go to pick her up on our first date, she walks outside, and I can tell there's something wrong. She's divorced with kids, and I'm thinking, I can tell by her nonverbal something's very wrong. And I'm like, no, there's probably a problem with the kids. She probably got to cancel on me. And she says, you're not going to believe this, but I need you to come into my house. And I'm like, okay. And she's really attractive, and I'm like, wow, I'm in her house. And she said, don't get me wrong, but I need you to come into my bedroom. I'm like,
this becomes even more intriguing. This is a great story.
I'm like, well, okay. And she said, you're not going to believe this, but there's a snake in my room. And I said, men say stupid things at the worst time. I said, oh, well, I'm not even in there yet. And she's like, no, you jerk. I'm not talking about you. There's an actual snake in my bedroom. So I walk in her bedroom, and I see a couple. Yeah, I see a couple pillows on the floor in her bedroom, and she's like, it's under the pillow. And I'm like, well, what do you mean to do? She's like, go get it. She said, I'm not leaving the house until you go get it. And I'm like, you want me to catch a snake? Those things are impossible to catch. She's like, just catch it, please. I don't know if I could leave my house. So I'm like, oh, God. All right. I said, here, I got an idea.
Oh, did you hear the show?
Go get a plate and go get a cup, and I'll try and trap it in the cup, within the plate and the cup. She says,
a little
good
snake.
idea. Well, actually, it was probably about a foot and a half long, but this snake had legs, which made it technically a salamander. We've got very strange amphibians and reptiles in our part of Central Florida. So I go to cup it. You know how plates are not perfectly flat. They're kind of concave. Anyway, I couldn't get it, and so the thing goes under her bed. And I'm like, oh no, I'm never going to get it now. And she's like, go under my bed and catch it, please. So I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me. So I slowly go under the bed. I figure if I go down there fast, it's going to just run off and we'll never find it. So I go as slow as I can, and it's making eye contact with me. I'm making eye contact with it. And I'm like, how do I do this without freaking it out and it get slithering away? So I decide to, like, put my hand behind it so it can't really see me coming behind it, and I'm staring at it the whole time, and it's staring at me the whole time. And I slowly bring my hand closer to it and catch it right by the back of its head, and he turns around and bites me.
Oh.
And I start freaking out. Oh, I start freaking out. I'm scared. I'm freaking out. And then the girl starts freaking out, and we're both screaming like little girls. and so I get up, and I'm like, let's just calm down. Let's just calm down. And he's squeezing even tighter at this point. And then I start to zen.
Oh, he's
I
still
start
on
to
your
zen
hand.
out. Yeah, and I start to communicate with this thing telepathically, literally. And I go, let's both relax. Let's both calm down. I don't mean you any harm. I'm just going to take you outside and let you go. And you know what? It let go. It let go, and I walked outside, and it jumped into the bushes, and we went on our first date to Universal Studios, ironically, and we've been in love ever since. So.
Did she patch up your hand?
No, it left a mark, but I didn't bleed or anything. But it was anyway. That
didn't swell.
So, yeah, like a year later, her and her kids gave me like this ceramic salamander for Christmas.
Now,
to commemorate.
Are they salamanders? Are they geckos? We have geckos. I'm in Hawaii,
I don't think that geckos bite, though.
So then I go to the animal speak book. They're all within the same genus, class, or phylum, I think. I'm not exactly sure. But then I go to the animal speak book. Animal speak books are great. You see things like that for a specific reason. And so there's a section on lizards, but there's a different section on salamanders. And the salamanders signified a state of metamorphosis and a state of change. And that actually made a whole lot of sense because she had just been married for 17 years and hadn't been with another man in 17 years. And, I had been dating for years, and I really just wanted to fall in love with one person. That's all I wanted, and I prayed about it every day. And it was between the girl who lived with me with the kids, who we had the ghost in the oldest daughter's bedroom. Between her and the new one, I didn't have a girlfriend for 4 years, and I prayed on it and I meditated on it every day to the point where I could start to see what she looked like. I could see her hair. I knew she had black wavy hair, and she's got black wavy hair,
Cool.
So it's just unbelievable.
That's great. I want to go back to Louisa and her books.
Yes.
All right. What do you want to convey to our listeners? I think we'll wrap this up at like 90 minutes instead of 2 hours. So go ahead, Louisa. What are some of the highlights that you want to tell our guests about your books?
Well, I guess I could just kind of recap that both books contain more than 100 stories related to the paranormal, whether it be contact with the dead or reincarnation, near-death experiences. And the first book also has a lot of history of the various types of psychic phenomenon, how many thousands of years they've been around in written history. And the second book, in addition to having the stories, also has all the studies that are being done by universities, the military, into the realm of the psychic. Millions of dollars are being spent on research. So I think we can take that to mean that there's some credibility, to the paranormal.
So there's a lot of people are investigating the paranormal. And do you think they're trying, like the government is trying to militarize it, like remote viewing?
Well, I think that they certainly have in the past, the remote viewing being, what we know about. Supposedly the remote viewing program was discontinued, but a lot of people think that it really wasn't. It just was taken out of the budget that we can see and put into a budget that we don't see.
Yeah, the black budgets.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's the Bible or something said that towards the end times, whatever, quote unquote, the veil will become thin and we will be able to communicate with the dead on a whole different level. and with more and more people coming out that they're psychic, well, it's probably been psychic all along, but it wasn't kind of socially acceptable. Now, does your family... Go ahead.
No, that's okay. Does my family what?
Are they going to be continuing to provide information to you as it unfolds? Give some kind of commitment with them to say, I'm here, I'd like to... Because they're probably having ongoing contact, like I am. I'm having ongoing contact.
Well, I think if something interesting comes up, they share it with me. And if they don't think it's interesting, they don't bother. Obviously the person I hear from the most is my husband because we live together, and he'll mention things now and then. I mean, the most tangible things that happen to us on a regular basis are the type of things that you would expect from a psychic. We'll go into the mall and they'll go, oh, the energy in here is really negative tonight. Let's get out of here. And, when we were first married, I was like, oh, sure it is. But now I realize, he really means it. That sort of stuff. And interesting point, which people who are listening who are psychic might find interesting, is that some researchers have found that people who are very psychic are more vulnerable to neurological problems. For instance, people who are very psychic are more likely than the average person who isn't psychic to have migraines, to have fibromyalgia. Some of the people I interviewed had MS. One had epilepsy. These are all neurological problems. And so if you have a hypersensitive nervous system, then it's also possible that it's more vulnerable than someone else's nervous system, and that you can develop problems because of that.
Something weird happened to me lately. In 2009, Michael Jackson came to me, and I ended up, my husband's a hypnotherapist and a counselor, and so we worked with that, and we worked with Michael, and, I just said, I stopped blocking it. For a while there, I wasn't allowing communication. But it was so powerful. It was like he just, hit me on the side of the head because he was so upset about being dead. He hadn't intended. Right? Some people were comfortable with it because they had a long illness or something. And then I shut that down. And then this year, lo and behold, David Bowie comes to me. And the reason I know they're coming to me is I'll be sleeping and I'll wake up and their songs are playing in my head. And when I woke up one day, it was Let's Dance, and I was going, Sonny, did David Bowie play? I didn't know that he sang Let's Dance. It just kept going on and on and on, and it wouldn't go away. It's like, well, you turn off that record. It was just in my head, and it was like crazy making. So I finally said, okay, let's go have him talk to us. And so there's a procedure that I think he learned from Bill Baldwin or one of his teachers over the years, and you allow them to speak through your vocal cords without taking over. So it's not like I disappear and another being comes through me, but I kind of like put my consciousness up on a shelf, and I'm there as this communication comes through. And David was kind of upset because he wasn't quite 100% prepared to die. But then when I let that one go, and then David brought all these people to show me. He says, we're not really dead. We're just here. We're just right here. If you look hard enough, you can see us. And so they don't come through my 3D eyes. They come into the mind's eye, which I've learned to accept is very real and very profound and powerful. Mm-hmm. And then, what was it, like a month later, here comes Prince. What was different about Prince is that he was ecstatic. He had no qualms about being dead. He said, this is awesome. This is the best thing ever. And he said, it's really wonderful energy. And I was just working too hard. And when I came back from the mainland one time, I tend to bring back stuff because you're on a plane, right? And I was like not feeling optimal. And he one night just came and he sent me his energy all night as I slept to a whole different vibratory frequency. So when I woke up, I was like, whoa, it was like really super high energy. And then I told my husband, I go, well, here's Prince, and he's dead, and he saw his little red Corvette, and I don't know one artist from another. I don't pay attention. You know, I'm not into.
Oh, that's a
all
great
that,
song.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I go, is that his song? Oh yeah. So anyway, I wondered if anybody else is getting communication from the dead, especially celebrities. I don't know why I'm getting celebrities. I'm not really like a fan type person. But it's just interesting. I'm getting a lot of communication this year in 2016. Already your psychic friends or relatives getting a lot of communication this year?
Most people that I speak to do not get communication from celebrities. They do get communications from friends, family, or somebody who's just kind of passing through, you know, because of a location they're at.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's certainly happening.
Yeah, I that's what was mainly happening for me. Like our housemate, I had a couple. I rent out rooms, and I've had people die on my property, and they'll come through real loud and clear, you know, because there was one young man that was only like 21 or 2 or something, and he's like, "I'm dead." Yeah, you're dead. Okay. A lot of them are.
Yeah, that's kind of sad to have so little time to learn whatever it is you came to learn.
Yeah. Well, if you ever get people reporting about psychics, maybe there's everything about celebrities coming. There might be something going on. My impression was that because they had public recognition, they wanted to get these messages out to, you know, because people pay attention to celebrities when they die more than the average person, right? And
sure,
they really were adamant about, this is, you know, we're not dead, we're just in a different vibratory frequency. So, all right, well, we're about let's wrap up this episode. And what are your books and your website? How can people get in touch with you?
The first book is Loitering at the Gate to Eternity, Memoirs of a Psychic Bystander, and that starts out with my husband's family and then goes on to people who are acquaintances and strangers, all of their experiences. And the second book is Sightseeing in the Undiscovered Country, Tales Retold by a Psychic Bystander. And you can read about both of those books at my website, which is www.psychicbystander.com. And both books are also available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or you can ask for them through any major distributor at a local bookstore.
And John, any final words or comments for Louisa or listeners?
To answer your question, Janet, I've been receiving from people that have just passed quite a bit also, not just people that I know in my family, but more specifically Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the sixth man to walk on the moon.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the Noetic Sciences founder, yeah?
Yeah, and actually he founded and co-founded Dr. Edgar Mitchell's the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters. And I went to a UFO conference February 5th in Big Bear, California called the Alien Snowfest. And ironically, the first day of the conference, he passed away, which was February 5th. And when I came back from the conference, February 8th, he came to me at like 2:33 in the morning. And I told our co-host, one of our co-hosts, Karen Christine Patrick, who's actually in Roswell right now for another UFO conference. And I told her about it, and she said, well, what did he say? And he told me that he passed before his time because he's needed on the other side for light work, but more in respects to disclosure, for disclosure happening the right way, through the right extraterrestrials, through the right government, through the right means and the right channels. And Karen was like, well, and Karen said, do you realize how many mediums have been saying the exact same thing? I'm like, no, I did not know. And then I was on another radio show, and Ray Hernandez, who's been on Aquarian Radio with us a few times, he sent me an email about Dr. Edgar Mitchell and the research findings from their study on experiencers, which we talked about at length a few weeks ago. But here's the trippy part about it, is that the email came through like 3 or 4 weeks late. And it came through when I was talking about what I just talked about on a radio show, talking about Dr. Edgar Mitchell. So I'm on this radio show. I'm talking about what I just told you. boom, here comes Ray's email about 3 weeks after he sent it. So that was no accident.
Weird.
Yeah, that was
wow.
no accident. But
no
Louisa, you're an incredible interview. Your books sound incredibly interesting, and you're on the right path. So I'm pleased that Janet found you, or however we got you on the show. It was an absolute treat to be able to talk to you.
Well, I enjoyed trading stories. You're wonderful at interviewing, and it's always a lot of fun to talk about this stuff.
Yes,
it is. I'm making a life out of it.
and I recommend those little kids that want to tell ghost stories, get Louisa's books and open them up and read them to each other when you do your slumber parties.
There you go.
All right. There you go. Well, thank you so much for coming on, John and Louisa. And everybody have a wonderful evening out there. Love and blessings, and aloha.
Aloha.
Take care.
Have you heard? Metro by T-Mobile now includes Amazon Prime. Yes, enjoy the best of shopping and entertainment, movies, TV shows, music, free shipping, and much more. All included for just $40 per line for 3 lines. All on the T-Mobile network. Discover the smarter way. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. One offer per account. Offer subject to change. $12.99 per month value. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video at 480p. Capable device required. See store for details and terms and conditions.